Hello and welcome to our mid-year review where we are going to be looking at some of this season's best moments and then rating them in our very own F1 tier list. It has been quite the season so far and I'm delighted to be joined by Jolyon Palmer and Lawrence Barretto. Guys, how are you enjoying the season so far? Jolyon, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's been brilliant, hasn't it? It's been so many good races in the 14 that we've had so far. It's actually difficult to look back and think of one that's not had us on the edge of our seats. It's been a long time since that happened. And yeah, after 14, it's been a bit of a thriller.
Lawrence?
Yeah, I've loved it. I think Max was looking formidable. Red Bull were looking formidable in those first couple of races. And I was like, are we in for like another season like last year with more Red Bull dominance, more Max dominance? But like Jolyon said, it's come alive. We've got 7 different winners in 14 races. I was excited about the summer break, but I'm equally excited about getting back racing and seeing who's going to come out on top.
Right, let's take some of these moments then and try to rank them under the following terms. Greatest of all time, legendary, highlights worthy, good from afar, far from good, and are you kidding? Disqualified. Now, this is going to be tough because there's going to be some recency bias here. But if we were to look at these moments from the season and try to rank them or rate them in terms of where they will place in the ultimate pantheon of F1 history, that's where we're going to have to try and do this thing. Oh, and one caveat, guys, we've only got enough space for 8 in each of the categories. So once that's full, or it will slide off our beautiful little illustration in the middle. Let's start before the season even started. We knew this year was going to be a hotbed of intrigue with a silly season possibly like no other, with so many drivers out of contract. But the one move we never thought we'd see is the one we got before the year had even begun. Lewis Hamilton moves to Ferrari. Lawrence, as our news hound on F1.com and F1 TV, where does this sit?
This is the easiest one that we're going to do all day, Will. It's greatest of all time because I think we've had so many stop-starts over the years of, is Lewis going to go to Ferrari? You know, various stories come up every now and then. We know that he talked to John Elkann. We know that he talked to Ferrari multiple times over the years and always ultimately said no and never really reached those kind of formal chats that he had last winter heading into this season. So for him to finally do it, and the year had barely even started. We just had Günther Stein obviously leaving Haas, and the news machine was already kind of in motion. And then we had this story. And I remember that kind of 12, 24 hours beforehand. I know you had some whispers, Will, about that it might be happening. But I remember thinking, oh, it's just another one of those false starts where we're linking him to that seat. And then obviously it built over 12 hours. The news started coming out. And, it's a huge story. For Lewis to join Ferrari, the most famous team in Formula One, after he's been at McLaren, he's been at Mercedes, and it looks, for all intensive purposes, like he was going to finish his career at Mercedes, and for him to jump to surprise Toto Wolff, that, you know, his long-term friend now, who's kind of backed him through all of those 6 world championships, and for him to leave that family to go to Ferrari, it's huge.
Yeah, I remember texting you about that. I was like, are you hearing what I'm hearing? Because this is huge. Yeah, for me, it's GOAT. It's probably the greatest driver of all time. Certainly the greatest driver of the current generation, and some generations as well. Last 20 odd years, going to the greatest team of all time. Jolyon, where do you put it? Up there with GOAT?
Oh, it has to be, doesn't it? You don't get driver changes like that too often. Certainly in the modern era, this is the equivalent of like Schumacher in 2005, 2006, switching to McLaren suddenly. This is maybe the greatest driver of all time. Statistically, he is. Switching to the iconic team that is Ferrari, the last roll of the dice. It's a beautiful story.
Right, that's an easy one. Greatest of all time goes to greatest team of all time, goes in greatest of all time. Next up, I think let's look at, we're talking about Ferrari. Let's go Ollie Bearman and his debut in Saudi Arabia. Where would we rate this one? Jolyon, let's start with you.
So I'd put this at highlights worthy. I think he did a great job. It was a really mature effort from him to jump in. I loved seeing the reactions from the garage when he was on his way as well, because he just never knew how he was going to cope. So young, thrust in without a Friday practice. But, I mean, there's a couple of caveats for Bearman for me. That's he loves Saudi. He always goes well in Saudi. He's had 2 front row starts. One was a pole in F2 had he taken the start, and he jumped in a very competitive Ferrari. So there's a bit of that. There's also the fact that he's not quite delivered anything like what we were expecting in Formula 2 this year, which sort of takes a slight bit of shine off. But you have to say, impressive drive. Really cool that Ferrari chucked him in and he rewarded them with some points. It's highlights worthy for sure.
Lawrence?
I want to push it one further up. I want to push it to legendary status, because I think that for all of the upside that he had going in, that he knew the track, and like Jolyon said, he had pole. He was driving for Ferrari. He had such limited time from knowing that he was going to be in the car. He had 1 hour practice before he had to get into qualifying. And as well as Saudi, that track is a different proposition in a Formula One car. In terms of the high-speed nature of it, obviously the wall's so close to the edge of the circuit. So I just think the way he dealt with that pressure at Ferrari was phenomenal. And I think that regardless of how he kind of goes on, unless he really doesn't do very well when he makes his debut with Haas, I think we'll be talking about this race as a significant moment in his career and one of the greatest stand-in performances of all time.
But he didn't get close to beating Leclerc, did he? His teammate. Not that he should, because Leclerc is one of the greats out there. No, look, we wouldn't expect him to, but that's the sort of thing that I think would be a bit more legendary, or even the GOAT stand-in. And people have stood in. I'm thinking Nick de Vries a couple of years ago had a brilliant stand-in for Williams, and it earned him a full-time seat, a bit like Bearman has. But then obviously de Vries didn't manage to cement that with decent drives last year. So the proof will be in the pudding, won't it? Next year,
it's going to be dependent. Yeah, it's going to be dependent on how his actual Formula One career goes. Like with Vettel standing in for Kubica at BMW at the US Grand Prix, the fact that Seb went on to win Grand Prix and then 4 Formula One World Championships, that debut is seen as legendary because he scored points as a stand-in. Ollie's, it's too early to tell, isn't it? I don't know. Oh, Larry B, I'm gonna have to go with Jolyon. I'm gonna have to drop you down to highlights worthy. I'm sorry, mate. Listen, let's go.
That's
for
okay.
What I think was what was actually, I think, a precursor to the season that we're having now, which was Imola, Max holding off Lando Norris to win. Jolyon, when you look back on this race, how do you think we're going to view that run to the flag between those two?
It was fun. It was a great chase, wasn't it? And it was the start of, McLaren cementing their status as regular race win contenders. In the end, I think this is good from afar, because that is as close as it got, really, right on the last lap. It was a tease of a race that never quite came. Max never had to defend. We never got the wheel-to-wheel battle that we've grown used to now at the front of Formula One. So it was good from afar. Imola was, in reality, very difficult to overtake. That's a brilliant finish, isn't it? But it's good from afar, because it was the battle that never quite was for me.
Give it 2 more laps, right? Give it 2 more laps, and we're possibly looking at legendary in terms of that kind of a result. Lawrence, what do you? I think I'm sitting with either highlights worthy or good from afar at the moment.
Yeah, well, I feel like we've been spoilt with so many good races that's just why this race in Imola probably isn't going to score as well as I think it should do, because I think it is kind of edging into highlights worthy. I was looking back at the predictions that we all made way back in Bahrain. And none of us put McLaren, I don't think, in the top 2 teams this year. I think that, they're around the 3rd or 4th best. So I think if you look at it from the perspective that Lando was, okay, not maybe challenging as in launching an overtake on Max, but was hunting him, then I think that's actually a massive step forward for McLaren. So in the context of where the battle was and what it meant for the championship, I think it was highlights worthy. I'm starting to get a feel for where you guys sit on this metric, on this spectrum. So I think it's probably going to end up from afar.
Well, it's difficult to have a highlights worthy without having a highlight moment.
A highlight, yes.
If you clip up the highlights and all you've got is that, you've got one car being closely followed by another car, but there's not even a defense taken by Max. It doesn't feel quite like it's going to be highlights worthy in the grand picture, but it was a nice race, great fight.
I tell you what, Lawrence, let's leave that in good from afar, and if we've only got 7 highlights by the end of this, we'll notch it up one to highlights worthy.
Yeah, I like that.
Next up, Carlos Sainz coming back from appendicitis. For me, incredible. We remember how much pain he was in. We remember the fact that the belts were rubbing over his scar. That for me is a legendary performance. It was sensational, I thought, from Carlos Sainz to come back and win.
Yeah.
Lawrence, I know you're pretty tight in with the Sainz clan.
I'm right there with you, Will. I think this was legendary. I think that if you think about the 16 days, that short space of time, and he was doing all sorts of treatments. He was trying literally everything he could. He brought a doctor with him to Australia that specialised in this special treatment just to try and get him those wounds healed as much as possible, getting him into the shape that he could do. For him to kind of fight back, do that long haul flight to Australia, then get into that weekend, and you could see how much discomfort he was in across that whole weekend. For him to then go on and win the Grand Prix, admittedly in a car that was clearly capable of doing it, and obviously Max had that issue, so it wasn't a fair fight at the front. But for him to go on and to win that race, I think we will continue to look back on this event and this race and the manner of that comeback over the years as something pretty special. So I'm going to nudge it into the legendary status.
Jolyon?
Yep. It was a consummate drive, wasn't it? And you got to remember that Carlos had no seat, so he was still very much on audition. Round 2, he didn't compete in because of the appendicitis. Round 1, he was very good in Bahrain, and then he came back and won ahead of Leclerc, ahead of the rest of the field, apart from Max. I think this was a legendary recovery. It wasn't, in many ways, the thrilling Grand Prix that we hoped it would be when Max was out in the dominant car, because Carlos was so good. He kept everyone at bay, and it was a cracking recovery.
Right, Lando Norris, first win in Miami. I think there's going to be a bit of debate about this. Guys, where do you place it? Jolyon, you first, mate.
Well, so I think this might also be... this might also be good from afar for me, because he didn't have that much of a highlights reel for the race. It was a good drive. It's lovely to see first time winners, and it's Lando's deserved it. He's earned it. He's been superb this year. But in terms of what he actually did in the race, he had a great first stint. He brought himself into contention even before the safety car sort of definitely made it sure that he had the win, and he drove away from Max. That was superb. No doubt a deserved winner, a very popular winner. But in the big picture of highlights of the year, I think good from afar. Nice story.
Lawrence?
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Jolyon, for a change. I think it was a great feel-good story for Formula One. I think it was great that Lando finally got that win. But I think when if you look at the race on the pure basis of what we saw, I think the team made good decisions. He made good decisions. He drove well. But I don't think even he would probably put it in the kind of legendary status, the greatest of all time, because I think he feels there's so much more to come from him personally. So yeah, I know it sounds weird not to put a first win and such a significant win for McLaren and a non-Red Bull win. The first team other than Ferrari to be a Red Bull in a long time. I know. I think that's probably fair.
Yeah, I totally agree with both you guys. The safety car really won the day for him there. There was a lot of chance that came into that for them. The fact that he got such a massive lead. Verstappen had already damaged his car as well, which took a lot of the competition out of it. So yeah, good. But when you look at it in context, not as good as the actual result suggests. Right. Talking about things not quite as good as they could have been, which suggests where I'm going to put this one. Ferrari's Miami livery. They were going to bring a blue car, guys. A blue car. And this is what we got.
A lot of hype. There are a few hopes out there that it might be an all blue car. It's Ferrari. It's always going to be red.
I liked it. I liked that shade of blue.
So that's what Jakesy was saying.
I think I was just disappointed that they didn't go full light blue. But what I'm going to say is that on the basis that we've got so many good highlights and they didn't go full blue, I'm going to put it in the bottom category, which I'm sorry, Ferrari.
Thank goodness for that. I thought you were going to say, I liked it. Highlights worthy. Nonsense. Get out of town. Disqualified.
Yeah, disqualified. I mean, come on. You're bringing on HP as your sponsor. You're racing in North America where they ran the NART livery back in the 60s, which was blue and white. Do the whole thing. Go the whole hog or don't bother. Disqualified. Get out. Right. Then a good news story. Charles Leclerc wins in Monaco. Finally, the curse is broken. Lawrence.
I love this. I love this weekend. I was talking to Fred, actually, specifically, Fred Vasseur, Ferrari team boss, about this weekend in Hungary. And he was actually saying that how easy that weekend was in so many ways, because everything went right. You know, from FP1, they were quick. They kind of did everything right. They didn't have any problems to overcome. It was almost like things ticked over in the way they'd hoped for. But I think what was so significant about that weekend was Charles had so much heartache in that race weekend over the years. And he'd finally managed to kind of get that result that I think he'd shown the pace and the capabilities to win that race in the past, and it just hadn't come together. So I think it was a great story for him. I think it really showed how strongly he was performing at the time. He was, I think, a bit annoyed, obviously, that Carlos had got the first win for Ferrari this season. He knew this car was strong. I think it was good that of the places that he was going to get that when it was in Monaco. So, yeah, I think it was a great weekend. I think it's probably between highlights worthy and good from afar, because I don't think it was quite legendary status. I think I'm starting to say what Jolyon would say, but I think it wasn't quite highlights worthy, but legendary status rather. But I think it's kind of around highlights worthy.
I'd do the same. Highlights worthy.
I'm shocked.
Well, he didn't have to do anything on Sunday. He had to do nothing on Sunday. So the story.
Okay, so the race itself was a dud. Even on Monaco standards, it was a dud. But the result, the meaning, the impact, the last lap commentary from Alex Jakes, that puts it greatest of all time. But I'd say like legendary. Are you guys going to pitch me down to highlights worthy on this?
Yeah. In the end, it was a nice story. It's a great story. But there was no drama to bring it on the Sunday apart from Jakes' commentary. So I think there was no jeopardy in the race,
all right.
which
sapped
it away a little bit.
All right. Lewis Hamilton's win in Silverstone. To counterpoint, what are we making of that, Jolyon? Let's go you to begin, mate.
Well, I am going to put this in GOAT territory because for this one was a great race.
Yeah.
It was a record-breaking race for Hamilton. 9 Grand Prix wins at a venue which happened to be his home race. It was a Hamilton Mercedes performance against the odds when Norris should have had the race. There was pressure from everywhere. It was a dynamic race. It was a thriller. And, of course, it's the last time Hamilton and Mercedes as a combination drive at Silverstone. He rounds it out with a win. I think this is Hollywood, that story.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you 100% of the way, mate. And the emotion that poured out of him and his dad after the flag, the validation. I mean, we described him as the greatest of all time. That the greatest of all time could have doubted himself to that degree, that win meant so much and was pulled off so masterfully. Okay, McLaren made their own bed that day. But for me, I'm with you, greatest of all time. One of Lewis Hamilton's greatest victories and so meaningful, Lawrence.
Yeah, we can make it unanimous. I think what really hit home for me is in the post-race interviews, it genuinely came across that he thought he was never going to win a Grand Prix again. And so I think for him to then go and win Silverstone and go and win it, obviously in his home crowd, that last one, like you said, for Mercedes on home soil, I just think and that outpouring of emotion and the way that he just drove that race and obviously took advantage of every situation, but did everything near perfectly. I just think we're not going to get many of those races. I don't think we'll get those feels that we got in that race. It's that kind of hairs up on your arms kind of feel. And I think Formula One's been spoilt with great races this year, but that one really stood out as like a real feel-good moment. And I think that, I think this one's got to go at the top.
Completely agreed. Right, Carlos Sainz moving to Williams. I'll kick this one off. I'm putting it in far from good. And the reason I'm putting it in far from good is because it dragged on so bloody long. And it was supposed to be announced in Barcelona and then it wasn't because he was going to go to Alpine or was it going to be Audi? And it's just like all of these options kept getting scratched off and the Mercedes and Red Bull and all of this. And it just... Was it a desperation because everything was disappearing for him? Listen, I love the move. And I think it's great because I think Carlos and Albon together at Williams is a really strong lineup. But God, I was just sick of it by the end. Lawrence, where do you want us to go with this?
I think I agree. It needs to be in the second half for the reason that it just went on for so long, and by the end of it, we were just like, okay, I'm glad we've got an answer now, because I don't think it almost didn't become about the quality of the team that he'd joined and what it meant. Because I agree that they have got a very strong lineup there now, Carlos and Alex Albon, and I think they're going to be formidable, and it's a great get for James Fowles. But because Carlos was kind of left, he hung on as long as he could for Red Bull. He hung on as long as he could for Mercedes. Those didn't kind of transpire. And then he was picking between Williams and Sauber Audi and Alpine. And it just kind of felt a little bit like a damp squib. And that's no disrespect to Williams and the team and the project. But I think it just went on to the point where I was just like, oh, okay. So I think it's between good from afar and far from good. So yeah, it probably does edge into far. It probably does edge into far from good for my.
Yeah, I'll make it unanimous on that. It's fine, but it's underwhelming for Sainz. It's brilliant for Williams. They dragged on and on and on. I still think Sainz to Red Bull was the move that he deserved, but obviously there's many reasons that didn't happen. So Williams is fine. It's not disqualified, but it's fine.
Haas, their amazing run in Canada. Jolyon.
I'm going to go for... I'm going to go from far from good. And it's... They didn't get any points in this race. They got no points. It was fun. And the reason I'm giving it more than just nothing for a no-pointer for Haas was that it was fun and they did something different on strategy, which we don't get much of these days. And when it pays off, then it's cool. And it would have paid off had they not butchered the pit stop for K-Mag. So yeah, it's far from good in the big
Lawrence?
picture.
I really want to put it up as high as highlights worthy, because I remember how cool it was to watch them cut through the field and for a gamble or a risk to really pay off. And I think it was great. I remember listening to the comms, and I think Kevin got up to P4, didn't he, in the end? And I just thought it was great from that perspective. But I think ultimately they didn't score. And so from that perspective, I agree with Jolyon. I don't think it can go in the top three categories. So I would go between good from afar and far from good, probably edging into far from good, just because I've seen the rest that we've got to talk through. And there's a lot of quality, Gavin.
It's not a big story, is it? It was fun for a while, but it's no point.
And yet we all talk about...
It would have been cool.
We all talk about Marcus Winkelhock leading in the Nürburgring back in the mid-2000s because they rolled the dice and made it work for them, you know? Listen, I would like to put it up higher because I think it reflected a new resolve about Haas and really going for things and a complete change in the mentality of the team this year. And I really like that. But I'll go with you guys. Far from good. I'll be overruled on it. Right. Austria. The last couple of laps, the contact between Max and Lando. Where are we putting this? Jolyon.
I mean, this is right between legendary and GOAT, isn't it? It's a battle for the lead between our two rivals for this year. I think it goes in GOAT. I'm going to put this in GOAT for a news story.
Wow.
You have these two drivers going at it lap after lap after lap, and then it ends in tears. Russell comes through to win the race. The fallout from it. I think as a moment goes, you don't get many times where the two leaders come together and they're both effectively out of the race. Not many
Lawrence,
in Formula One history.
We were talking about that front wing all weekend. That they brought it. If anyone was going to get too close, there was going to be a puncture. Okay, he got the puncture before he hit Lando's front wing. What a talking point! What a moment!
Yeah, I think to Jolyon's point that it was a fight for the lead and that this rivalry had been building, and it felt like at some point Lando was going to test Max's resolve and see, how far he could push the limit. I think from that perspective and the story and what it meant for the narrative, I think it has to go in greatest of all time, because I don't think we could easily sit here now and pick 10 or 20 similar moments in the last 10, 15, 20 years where they were up to that level. I remember the excitement, the buzz, the atmosphere afterwards. I remember the post-race chats that we had on the F1 TV show. Like, there was genuine excitement about what we had in store. Two huge talents were fighting for race wins and possibly the narrative for the next couple of years over the World Championship. So yeah, I think it was a huge moment and very much highlights reel worthy as limit. I imagine the video editors had plenty of footage that they could make a cool hype edit out of.
And I still think it changes how they race each other from now on. I think it's a big moment with two drivers that have and had a lot of respect for each other. But that was like the seminal moment to me of Max and Lando racing each other, where it goes on, ends in tears, and the fallout from it. I think it's got the prospect of being big moving forward as well.
Love that. Right, let's move on to quite a controversial moment. Australia, Williams doing the old switcheroo. It was Albon who shunted. It was Sargent who missed out on the Grand Prix. Lawrence.
This was probably peak difficult times for Logan Sargent in his career, when he had to effectively give up, or the car was taken away from him. His own race car was taken away from him for the good of the team, really, so that Alex, because they believed that Alex had the better chance of scoring the points. Really tough on Logan, but Williams were in such a difficult situation. They didn't have a spare chassis. They lacked parts because of production issues as a result of changing processes over the winter. So Williams were in a position that, this is what James Vowles had come in to sort out. And I think they've done that. They've done process changes so they won't be in this position again in the future. But it was tough for Logan, and really set the tone for kind of maybe what Williams thought of him going forward. Super unlucky. Where does it go on this scale? This is a tricky one. I'd probably go from kind of around far from good, to be honest, because I don't think there's anything positive to say about it. I think it's really harsh on Logan. I think it was really harsh on Williams, the situation they're in. So I think it's probably around there. I'm not sure what you guys think.
Yeah. I'd nudge it down to the bottom.
Yeah. Really?
Bottom.
How come?
Well, I don't agree with the decision. I think race 3, you're taking away the one that hasn't crashed to give the guy that crashed a chance in the Grand Prix. He then didn't score a point. Maybe as a story, it could go far from good because it's slightly more eyebrow raising than the actual decision. There's nothing positive about this, is there? It completely destroyed Sargent's morale. After just 2 races this year, he had to improve. He had to step up. He had the backing of the team. And then after the Friday of the 3rd race, he's sidelined. That's a stinker for me.
Yeah, and it begged the question, why did they sign him again in the first place? What was the point in signing this kid if you don't actually have the faith that he's going to bring home the points when you need him to? I thought it was just messy all round. Disqualified or far from good? I think, do you know what? Let's not be overly harsh. Let's leave that in far from good. I have two votes for far from good, 1 vote for DSQ. Right. Lovely emotional moment, but is it one we'll remember in the annals of F1 history? Zhou Guanyu at the Chinese Grand Prix. A lovely moment, an emotional moment, Jolyon. But is it worthy of the all-time list of F1 memories?
Disqualified. Well,
yeah,
he finished 14th out of 17 drivers, and he celebrated it like a win. Not for me. Not for me, that. I understand the emotion of racing at home. He's been doing it a few seasons. China's back on the calendar. There was a good crowd, but celebrating a 14th place finish doesn't do anything for me.
Jolyon, if you were the only British driver in the field during your career in Formula 1 and you finished 14th at Silverstone and they put out a board for you on the start-finish straight, would you have taken it?
No, I'd have felt a bit embarrassed, to be honest, to do that. I understand different cultures are different, and for Zhou, the pictures do a lot of the talking. He's so emotional. It's a huge thing having a Chinese driver in Formula 1. I guess British driving history warrants that a 14th place finish is nothing when you got Hamilton winning 9 Grand Prix at Silverstone. If I'd pulled up at the start finish and celebrated my 14th, I think people would be laughing at me. So it's not for me. It might be for other people. It's not for me.
You're disqualified.
Are you kidding?
Yeah. Lawrence, where are you putting it?
Yeah, well, you and I did the drivers' parade obviously for that, and I remember you interviewed Joe, and I remember the noise,
it was
and the
amazing.
absolute racket that kind of infused the place when they heard Joe was up and listening to him talking. And I think the love for Joe in China, or the support for what he's trying to achieve in Formula One, is huge. So I think from that perspective, it was a really cool thing, and I thought he dealt with the pressure really well. The number of media duties he did up until that event was huge. But I think the reality is, like Jolyon said, it was 14th. It was not points. He didn't have a particularly strong race. I think if you were we're talking about Lewis winning at Silverstone, and we're talking about this moment for Joe, then I think there is quite a big gap between them. So yeah, I think I would agree, and I'd put it in DS.
To say the least.
You're going to put it. So I wanted to put it in good from afar, because it was lovely, and from afar. It was brilliant when you go down into the depth of the detail with it. Like, yeah, okay, it was a 14th place, but it's the fact this kid, like, he was in the grandstands as a child, and then he got to race in front of his home fans. The return to China after so many years of not having the Grand Prix there, the emotion, the roar of the place, the fact that he has invigorated a nation for their love of Formula One. I thought it was really, really amazing. But you two are just hectic. Right, McLaren's livery at Monaco. What are we saying about the Ayrton Senna tribute livery, the Ayrton Senna tribute shirts, all of that at Monaco? Lawrence, let's begin with you, mate.
Well, we were talking about Ferrari earlier, not going the whole hog. You've got to give it to McLaren. They completely went for it with this livery. It was a full wrap of the car. The whole team wore special yellow kit as well. I think they completely went for it. I think it was a cool thing to do it in Monaco, because obviously Ayrton had so much success there with McLaren on this track. So I love it. I love livery changes. So I thought it was a pretty cool thing. But then in terms of where we slot it in, I think it was probably like good from afar, kind of around that territory. Good from afar, far from good, around there really for me.
Yeah, I'm going to say far from good. I wasn't a huge fan of it. I got to be honest with you. Like, do the car like the helmet livery, like the shirts. If you're gonna do it, I don't know. There was something about it just felt a bit off for me. But I don't know, Jolyon, what do you think?
I'm just not a livery changes sort of guy. It doesn't wet my whistle. It was a nice looking livery. When you look at the pictures, it's a really smart looking car. So maybe that takes it off the disqualified to being a far from good. But there's nothing too exciting about a livery change, I don't think. And they didn't win with it. Far from good.
It's not going to be something that we remember forever, is it?
I'd already forgotten about it, to be honest.
There we go. Let's move on to something we probably will remember forever. Adrian Newey, gone. The most successful designer of all time. The man who has been behind every Grand Prix victory, every World Championship that Red Bull Racing have achieved, is leaving the team. Jolyon, where do you put this?
I think this is GOAT. I think this is such huge news. And it's with everything else that's going on as well at Red Bull this season. The chatter of both drivers' futures. We now know that Jonathan Wheatley's leaving. We know that the car that's been absolutely romping away with it for a year and a bit has been caught. And then the guy that has headed up everything that Red Bull have done successfully, since 2006 he joined, he's now walked. It's absolutely huge news, and for the team as a whole, it's transformative, isn't it? They've lost the guy that steered the ship in terms of the car design. He's made rocket ships for so many years. He's leaving. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm with you, Lawrence.
Yeah, I'm here with you as well. I think it even battles Lewis going to Ferrari as the biggest story of the year, because I know Adrian doesn't have, and maybe the tech or engineers don't have that same kind of cachet as the others, but I think that who he is and what he's done in Formula One is so significant. And for him to leave that super team and having been such an integral part of it, to choose any plethora of teams that he could go to or go into retirement, I think it was a huge story, because I just didn't think at the point in which he decided to announce the news that it was actually going to happen, because they talked over the years. Ferrari had chased him 3, 4, 5 times over the years. Multiple teams have chased him sometimes with huge offers, financial offers, and he's always said no. So I think for him to decide now to go was significant. So yeah, I think greatest of all time, easy peasy.
That's an easy one. I think this is going to be an easy one for Jolyon Palmer. Alpine's Wolverine Deadpool livery. Disqualified for you, Joe. In the bin, in the skip. Lawrence, for you, mate.
Yeah, I think it's going to go at the bottom as well. Like, I liked it. But no, it wasn't for me. I'm probably going to forget about it before the end of the year. Sorry, no. Alpine, but yeah.
Yeah,
still and added fibre on half the car.
This is it. A team that's trying to weight save anyway. There's barely any paint on the car as it is. Do you know what I'd like to see? I'd like to actually see Formula One get rid of the rule that says both cars need to have the same livery. And if you're going to do like it would have been cool to have like a Wolverine car and a Deadpool car, like, you know, and the Star Wars sponsored Red Bull back in the day, like have a Jedi car and a dark side car. I'd like to see that. Anyway, no, it wasn't.
Have an Alpine look like an Alpine.
All this coming from the man who had Star Wars liveried overalls. And you still haven't seen it.
And you couldn't spot them from the outside.
It's a shame, because they were really good.
They were really one of my favourite pairs. I don't even watch Star Wars, but they were great.
just for all the kudos they got you. Right. Monaco lap 1 crash, which meant that the race was an absolute dud because there wasn't a single pit stop. Where are we putting this? Who's go with? Jolyon.
I'll jump. It's far from good. It was a big crash. I think there was the second part as well, wasn't there, with the Alpines? It was a bit of drama. Certainly, it was a talking point in the short term. It was a restart. It helped Carlos Sainz out dramatically. He was going to be effectively out of the race. So it's far from good, just because it destroyed, as you said, any hope of a race further ahead. It was a tough sell, the rest of the Grand Prix.
Yeah, it was. Lawrence, where do you put this?
Yeah, I think purely because it did kill the race. I think it's got to go. Well, it could even go disqualified, to be honest. I just feel like it's so hard to get a good Monaco Grand Prix these days. This first lap incident kind of paid to any hope that we were going to have a good race there. So, yeah, I think I probably would edge towards, are you kidding, DSQ.
Cool. Okay. So we're going far from good or disqualified, guys? Which one?
Far from good, I guess, because I guess there was at least a highlight reel from it, wasn't there? And they were all okay. And there was
at least there was a story. At least there was a story from it.
All right. The next one we have a little bit of footage for, which we will play now.
Lewis, it's great to see Mercedes this year with a car that hopefully you can kind of attack and move forward. I know that you're maybe not too far up the grid of where you'd like to be, but you excited about the prospects of what you can achieve from ninth today?
Yeah, let me pull you up on something. You rated me pretty low on the predictions. Oh, right, I'm messing with you. Just putting you on the spot. You should see his face.
One of my favourite moments of the year. Absolutely brilliant. We were all asked to do our predictions at the start of the season. We were asked to do our predictions before pre-season testing had even started. And Lawrence, you put Lewis where?
7th. Which I think, ironically, he finished in the race. And I think he's P6 in the driver's standings as it stands. So I'm not like massively off. But I died a little bit inside that moment. I'm sweating now thinking about it. It was, yeah.
Oh
God.
I've put this up at GOAT. Jolyon, what do you reckon?
What a moment. It's anything from highlights worthy upwards, but that is just brilliant.
Should we knock it down to legendary just so Lawrence doesn't get a big head?
Oh dear.
We'll put that there. I love that.
We'll pull that up again at the end of the year.
Thanks,
and
mate, appreciate it.
every year from now on. Right.
But I'm gonna
Now this
I want
might
to
be a
reiterate,
contentious one.
right?
Oscar,
He's P6. He's P6.
Okay,
Oh,
okay.
he's on the charge. He's on the charge. 7.
I mean,
Incredible.
Anyway, sorry guys. Sorry, I don't want to derail.
it's
this,
not
but,
the
like,
prediction, it's the fact that Lewis called you out. It's the fact that
yeah.
he reads what you write and actually called you out on it. I love that.
Which was really
guys,
that was
Oscar
really-
Piastri's win in where was it? Hungary. That's the one. Oscar Piastri's win in Hungary. Where are we putting this? Because just as we said with Lando Norris, good from afar. A first victory doesn't necessarily mean that it's one of these things we're going to remember for the right reasons, or because of how it came about. Jolyon, let's start with you. Where do you think we'll ultimately view this in F1 history? Oscar's first win.
I think I'd put this in highlights worthy because the win itself, I think, was all right. It was a solid. Again, it's great to see first time winners. Really nice that Oscar got a victory. The drama came from the team orders, didn't it? And it was partly the drama, but it partly overshadowed Oscar's win as well. So you sort of get points for drama, but minus points for taking away some of the gloss of a first win. But I think because it gave us a big narrative, it was a big talking point. Would Lando give the place up? Was McLaren's strategy sensible? I'd put it highlights worthy as a story.
Lawrence, what about you, mate?
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think I'd nudge it up from good from afar into highlights worthy, just because of the narrative that we had through that race, the uncertainty as to what Lando was going to do. I mean, Lando didn't even know what he was going to do for parts of that race. So I think from that perspective and the jeopardy that we had, I think it was a great story. I think Oscar's first win was cool, even though that isn't the metric here. But yeah, I think there was enough in this race. I think there was enough going on to put it in the highlights worthy.
So you see, it's out of all the races this year, it's the one that's had me on the edge of my seat the most, because I didn't know if Lando was going to give that up. And once again, it's the team asking the drivers to make the decisions, whether it was over the tyres or this time, righting the wrong of a strategy they didn't need to employ, and all of those things bubbling away of the team which had now the fastest car. And there was so much tension and so much pressure in that I was sat at home watching it. It's just so nervy. So I was thinking legendary for how we might remember it in the future, but I will agree with you guys. I think highlights worthy is a great place to put it.
I think if Lando hadn't have given up the win, that would have made it into a bigger story. But because he eventually
then it's up there.
Yeah, I think because he gave up the win and he did eventually follow the team orders, and the result was as McLaren designed it to be, it sort of returned itself towards, for me, highlights worthy.
George Russell gets disqualified in Belgium, the most recent race that we've had. Where does this one sit? Lawrence, let's start with you.
This is a tough one. I feel for George, and so in terms of the narrative and the story, I think it was top, and that pushes it up towards the end. I think it becomes a bit of a damp squib when the result is changed after the checkered flag, so I think that kind of dampens it a little bit. But then I also like the fact that it feels like this was another race where it showed that Mercedes had come in and kind of going to make it a three-way fight with McLaren and Red Bull for race wins on a regular basis. So I'm kind of probably edging towards between good from afar and highlights worthy. Probably good from afar is where I'd settle on, I think.
Right, interesting. See, I'd put it highlights worthy or legendary. The reason being that at the time that George crossed the line, and okay, he got disqualified, the top three were covered by, 1.1 seconds? The top six were covered by less than 10 seconds. And all of this at Spa with no safety cars, no rain playing any effect at all. It was such a close contest and just showed how tight the field is in Formula One this year. So I thought it was mega just for those reasons. Jolyon?
It would have been legendary had he not been disqualified, but I feel like that takes away from some of the great story of, a guy that's been not looking like getting a podium suddenly winning a race. I think it would have just been such a great story had Russell landed the race. And you can see the emotion and the celebration after it. And it was, again, I spoke about the Haas strategy in Canada. I love when someone does something different to the rest of the field and it pays off. It's a really great thing, because so many times it's just formulaic at the moment. All the top 8 start on the same tyre, do the same strategy, and they're sort of scared to do anything different. I love that Russell went brave. He called it from the cockpit. It was brilliant. But because he got disqualified, saps, again, a little bit of the story, I think, away. So maybe highlights worthy for me.
Okay. Lawrence, you wanted good from afar. I wanted legendary. We'll put it in highlights worthy in the middle. Okay, George Russell, Austria, takes the win after Lando and Max come together. I think we're putting this one in there for Toto getting on the radio to George and saying, you can win this, and George being like, yeah, I know. So where are we putting this one, Lawrence?
I thought this was a heck of a drive from George. I think to put himself in that spot in P3 to take advantage should something happened, and there was a good chance as the weekend built into it that there was going to be something that happened. So I thought this was a great race from George. I loved Toto's commentary from an entertainment perspective. I'm not entirely sure it was the most useful thing for George at that time, as George's response hinted at. But I think in terms of a moment, yeah, I thought it was a cool moment. I'm sure it did its rounds on social media. I think people will be talking about that moment. I think people will remember when Toto came on the radio. So I think it probably is highlights worthy from that perspective.
I'd drop it good from afar. I think the story of Austria was Max and Lando. Then you get Russell picking it up. He's being chased by, it was Carlos and then Oscar as well. And it was drama to the end. I love that Toto got so excited and he just jumped on the radio, and it showed us the tension in that moment. And Mercedes hadn't won a race for an awfully long time. So there was still, after that, you got to remember that there was still a race win to be had for Russell, who delivered it. But are we going to remember it for years to come? I don't know. Good from afar, I think.
Yeah, I think we'll remember the contact more than we'll remember the win. Canada as a whole, the Grand Prix itself, in those conditions, another one that I loved. I loved watching that. McLaren strategic blunders ultimately handing the win away. But Jolyon, where would you put this year's Canadian Grand Prix on this list?
Legendary. I think it's a legendary race. You had, by the way, a dead heat in qualifying with Mercedes jumping. It was the first race Mercedes looked like they could fight for a win again. You had Russell leading it. Then you had Norris leading it. Either of those two could have won on a different day if circumstances had played out in another way. But then Max took the lead, and you had safety cars. You had wet start, then drying, then rained again. You had, I don't know how many finishes, 12, 13 finishes in the race. So many drivers just finding the damp patch, ending in the barriers. Even some of the big teams, Perez and Sainz, managed to find the walls. Right to the end, there was drama. I forgot about this one with is that Tsunoda going straight through the runoff right at the end as well. Legendary race. We'll look back on that one fondly.
Loved it, Lawrence.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Legendary race. I love races where you've got those tricky conditions. You really see what the drivers are made of. I love it then when you get the changeable conditions and strategy and driver decisions come into it. This was obviously a race where Ferrari had their worst of the season, double retirement. It kind of really peaked after such a great weekend in Monaco. So I think there were lots of stories in this race. There was lots to talk about coming out of Montreal. So yeah, I think this definitely is cemented, and as many Canadian Grand Prix are, in legendary status.
Even Max went off from the lead. He went off in cut the chicane at turns 3 and 4. I think he was actually second place at the time, but he was fighting it so hard as well. They were all having to work really hard.
Brilliant stuff. Right, last one for us, and it is Mattia Binotto signing for Sauber / Audi. I guess everything that kind of followed from that as well, with Jonathan Wheatley now leaving Red Bull to go and join Mattia there, with both of them kind of taking this leadership role at the team. Lawrence, it has been a huge story, Audi, and not always a positive one at the moment, given the difficulties that Sauber find themselves in. How much of a positive story is it that someone of Mattia's experience, both from a perspective of being a team principal, but also from the engineering side of things, given his huge history at Ferrari, going to Audi? What does this mean for them, and where does it ultimately sit on our tier ranking?
Well, I think in a year, if we didn't have the Lewis to Ferrari and the Adrian leaving Red Bull story, I think this would be right up there as one of the biggest stories of the year. I think when Mattia left Ferrari, or was asked to leave, it kind of felt like he had unfinished business in the sport, and he had so much experience. You talk to lots of people within Ferrari, they'll tell you what a great job that he did. And he has been trying to find a pathway back in, and it's just worked out that Audi is exactly the kind of project that he would like, where he can kind of start it from the ground up. He'll have the massive resource behind him. He can use that engineering expertise that you mentioned to really help shape some of the issues I think that Audi will have with the new power unit that they're going to bring in, and trying to get on top of that chassis, which has been the worst, not just this year, but for a number of years now. So I think having that engineering leadership characteristic will be significant. And I think Jonathan Wheatley helping him, and from a team principal perspective, I think it could be a really good dynamic. But it was significant because Audi had put all of their eggs in the Andreas Seidel bucket. Like, they had been chasing him for a significant amount of time. He was the one that triggered all of those team boss moves at the end of 2022. And for them to then decide that he wasn't the one anymore is huge. And you can look at what he did at McLaren. And I think there's probably two camps. There's the camp that said he did a great job. There's the camp that said actually he didn't do such a great job, or the success was for other reasons. But he went into the Sauber Audi project. And to be honest, I think it was probably a bit too much to do in the time that he had to do it. And I think that Audi probably just felt like it was time to give someone else a go. And with Mattia kind of around and keen, it made a lot of sense to bring someone with his huge experience on board to just try and turn this mothership around.
So where are you putting it?
Legendary.
Jolyon?
Wow. You predicting Audi to go on a Constructors' Championship domination with that? I would say we can call it good from afar. They need change. The team they've scored one top 12 result this year. So I think Seidel, I thought he was a good hire. Maybe he would have been, given the time to morph into Audi. But in the end, Sauber have just gone backwards so dramatically. They couldn't even do pit stops at the start of the year, let's not forget. They're just not an appealing team to go for, which is why Sainz hasn't gone there, when in theory having a big manufacturer come in should be huge. So I think good from afar. Binotto has had one key role as team principal, and he's not remembered all that greatly for his stint at Ferrari. Won some races, got them sort of towards the front, but they were in no way capable of cementing that, with loads of other issues. So is he necessarily going to be the guy to lead them right the way to the front again? I don't know, but you can see that they're building. They needed some level of change to get a bit more interest about a manufacturer team coming back in. So good from afar, but it's tough to see that this one's a legendary move right now.
So Larry B with legendary, Jolyon with good from afar. I will play peacemaker and put it highlights worthy. For as much as the obviously having to get rid of Andreas, as Lawrence said, they put all their faith in him. It didn't go as planned. It started to go off the rails. He's gone. Hoffman's gone. In comes Binotto. Along with that, Wheatley as well. I think the whole story, when you combine all of those factors together, it does make it a massive story for a huge OEM entering the sport, trying to turn around the team that is ostensibly the slowest in Formula One at the moment. It's a big story. Big story. Guys, thank you so much. That is it. That is our ranking of the season so far. 4 moments that we believe will ultimately be ranked as some of the most important in Formula One history. Absolutely incredible stuff. Thank you for your insight, guys. Can't wait to see you in Zandvoort in a few days' time when Formula One gets back up and running. Thank you all for watching us online. Let us know in the comments what you think we've got right. You'll probably also, and I'm sure far more regularly, let us know what you think we've got wrong. But do let us know where you would rank these moments as well. Until next time, Jolyon, Lawrence, thank you so much. Thank you folks for watching, and we'll see you very soon. Goodbye.